What would you do if everything you thought you deserved was suddenly taken away by someone else? Sarah stood motionless in the grand hallway of her family's mansion, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. The floor beneath her feet, covered with marble that had been polished to a shine, seemed to reflect the turmoil she felt inside. Her eyes stared blankly at the large portrait of her father hanging on the wall. He had always been the pillar of the family, the man who had built everything they had: wealth, prestige, and a name that commanded respect. And now he was gone. Gone, just like the legacy she thought was hers. It had only been a week since her father's death, but it already felt like an eternity. The funeral had been a blur, a mass of black suits and somber faces, none of which mattered to Sarah. She wasn't grieving just for the loss of a father, but for the loss of everything she thought she had earned. The wealth, the inheritance, the family name, her right. At the reading of the will, she had expected, no, she had assumed, that everything would be divided equally. That she and her sister, Emily, would share in the legacy of their father's success. After all, they had both grown up under the same roof, had shared the same experiences. Sarah had always thought they were partners in this life. But when the lawyer read out the contents of the will, Sarah's world shattered. Emily, her older sister, was the sole heir. It didn't make sense. Emily had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. The one who had inherited their mother's charm and their father's business acumen. Sarah had always felt like the shadow, always trying to prove she was worthy, always playing catch-up. But this was too much. This wasn't just a matter of feeling overlooked. This was everything: the wealth, the house, the business, everything that Sarah had ever known and dreamed of had been handed over to Emily, without question, without hesitation. Sarah's fists clenched at her sides. She tried to suppress the storm of emotions that swirled within her: betrayal, anger, confusion. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what that money represented: security, control, validation. Without it, Sarah felt powerless, as though her life had lost its meaning. She had grown up in the shadow of Emily, the perfect daughter, the one who always excelled. Emily was the one who had inherited their father's confidence, the one who always seemed to be in control. Sarah, on the other hand, was always the rebel, the one who took risks, made mistakes, and was often the second choice. Yet she had always believed that, in the end, her loyalty and hard work would count for something. But now, standing there in the empty, silent hallway, Sarah realized that those dreams were nothing but illusions. Why? Sarah whispered to herself, the question echoing in the vast emptiness of the house. She wasn't sure if she was asking about the inheritance or about life itself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Daniel, the lawyer who had read the will. Sarah had tried to ignore him after the will reading, but something about his message caught her attention. "Sarah, please meet me tomorrow. I have something important to discuss." She stared at the screen for a moment, feeling a strange tug in her gut. Why did he want to meet? Was there more to the will than she knew? Was there a mistake? She had a million questions, and every instinct told her that she couldn't let this go, not yet. Not when she still felt like there was something she deserved. She couldn't just walk away from everything that she had grown up with, everything that was supposed to be hers. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed the thought of the inheritance to the back of her mind. She couldn't do this alone. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to stop until she got them. The next day, Sarah arrived at Daniel's office, a sleek, modern space with glass walls that overlooked the city. The air smelled like freshly brewed coffee, but it did little to calm her nerves. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor as she entered the office, where Daniel was waiting for her, sitting behind a large oak desk. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said, his tone professional but with a hint of something more concern, perhaps. It made Sarah uneasy. "You said you had something important to discuss," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Is there a mistake with the will?" Daniel glanced at the papers in front of him and then back at Sarah. "I need to ask you a few questions, Sarah. It's about your father's will. There's something I need to clear up." Sarah's heart raced. Was there a mistake? Could Emily's inheritance be a mistake? A part of her prayed for it to be true, for everything to return to normal. "What do you mean?" she asked, sitting down across from him. "There's nothing to clear up. Emily's the sole heir. She gets everything. That's what the will says." Daniel hesitated, his fingers tapping the edge of his desk. "It's not that simple," he said quietly. "There's something in the will that was overlooked. Something that might change everything." Sarah leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What are you talking about?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "Sarah, your father made some decisions before he passed. And I believe he may have had some reservations about how the inheritance was to be distributed. There's a possibility that you're the true heir." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean I'm the true heir?" "Emily's name was on the will. She's the one who gets everything." Daniel pushed a folder across the desk toward Sarah. "This is a copy of the original will. You need to see it for yourself." Sarah opened the folder, her hands shaking slightly as she flipped through the pages. And then, there it was tucked away in the final pages, a letter that hadn't been read during the will reading. The words were clear. Sarah was to inherit the family estate, the company, and everything her father had built. Not Emily. The truth hit her like a tidal wave, overwhelming her senses. She wasn't sure if she was relieved, shocked, or angry. But one thing was clear, her life was about to change forever. Sarah's hands trembled as she sat in Daniel's office, the contents of the letter before her now seared into her mind. She was the true heir. Not Emily. The realization sent a rush of conflicting emotions through her: relief, anger, confusion. But more than anything, she felt lost. For as long as she could remember, Emily had been the one who had everything. The one who was always first in their father's eyes, the one who inherited his trust, his love, his approval. Sarah had always been the backup, the one left behind. The black sheep. The one who never quite measured up. And now, here it was, her father's final decision. A secret will, hidden away for all these years, declaring Sarah the rightful heir to everything that had once been Emily's. Why would he do this? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt a chill spread through her as she looked at Daniel. Why wasn't this part of the will read aloud? Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly torn. "I'm not entirely sure, Sarah. I only discovered this last week, after the will was already read. Your father made a lot of decisions in the final months of his life that no one knew about. He was unsettled, to put it mildly." "Unsettled?" Sarah's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Daniel leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Your father's business dealings were becoming more complicated. There were things happening behind closed doors that were putting a lot of pressure on him. Financial issues, personal issues. He had to make some tough choices. And it seems that, in the end, he felt you were the one who could carry on his legacy." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Sarah couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. It didn't make sense. Her father had always been the pillar of strength, the one who held everything together. But now it seemed that the truth was far more complicated. "Are you saying?" Sarah hesitated, her voice cracking, "that he left everything to me because he didn't trust Emily to handle it." Daniel took a deep breath, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "I don't know what your father's true reasons were, but it's possible that, in his final years, he felt you were more capable than anyone realized." The word capable stung. Sarah had always tried to prove herself, always tried to step out of Emily's shadow. But no matter what she did, her father had never seen her as the successor. Always Emily. Always the perfect one. Until now. And Emily doesn't know about this? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. Daniel shook his head. No, I haven't told her yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first. Sarah stared at the letter in front of her, her mind racing. How was she supposed to handle this? She had spent her whole life under Emily's shadow, always the second choice. And now she was supposed to take over the business, the family estate, the life Emily had always assumed would be hers. How do I even begin to tell her? Sarah muttered, her voice laced with a mixture of dread and guilt. Daniel sat back in his chair, his expression softened. That's a decision you'll have to make, Sarah. But you should know this inheritance is more than just money. It's your father's legacy. You don't have to make this decision alone. Sarah glanced up at him. What do you mean? Daniel hesitated for a moment before speaking. There are still a lot of unknowns. I'm willing to help you navigate this, Sarah. If you want, we can look into your father's business affairs together and figure out what needs to be done. It felt like a lifeline. Sarah had always been independent, but in this moment, she realized how much she needed someone she could trust. Daniel had been her father's lawyer for years, and despite the overwhelming shock of his revelation, Sarah sensed that his offer came from a place of genuine concern. I don't know what to do, she said softly, looking down at the letter again. I've never wanted to take anything from Emily. I don't even know if I want all of this. It's just too much. Daniel gave her a sympathetic look. Sometimes, the right thing isn't the easiest thing. You'll need to decide what you want, not just what you're supposed to do. Sarah sat there in silence, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She had worked so hard to prove herself to her father, to make him proud. But now it felt like that hard work had come with a price, one that she wasn't sure she was ready to pay. Later that evening, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, staring at her reflection. The weight of the letter still hung heavy in her mind, its contents nagging at her. She had always wanted her father's approval, his recognition. But she never expected it to come in the form of a secret will, a decision made in the final days of his life that she had no way of understanding. A soft knock on her door broke her train of thought. Sarah? Emily's voice called out from the other side. Can I come in? For a moment, Sarah froze. She wasn't ready to face her sister, not now, not like this. But she couldn't avoid her forever. She slowly walked over to the door and opened it, forcing a smile as she saw Emily standing there, her eyes filled with concern. What's up? Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Emily didn't respond right away. She just looked at her sister with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I've been thinking about everything. About Dad's will. I know it's been a tough time for all of us, but I was hoping we could talk. Sarah swallowed hard. Her stomach twisted in knots. Talk about what? About the future, Emily said softly, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. I know this is all overwhelming, but we need to figure out what's next. Together. For a brief moment, Sarah felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by a rush of anger and frustration. Together? Emily had never considered sharing anything with her. Everything had always been hers, the spotlight, the admiration, the legacy. But now, as Emily stood before her, there was something different in her eyes. Was it fear? Or was it a plea for help? I don't know, Sarah said, shaking her head. I just don't know. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Sarah stood outside the family's old summer house, clutching a manila folder to her chest like a shield. This house, unlike the grand mansion in the city, held the real memories, sunburnt summers, whispered secrets under blankets, and the smell of her father's pipe lingering in the den. Here, she had once believed they were a real family. But that belief had long crumbled. And now, so much more was cracking beneath the surface. Inside, Emily paced in front of the stone fireplace, wine glass in hand, eyes sharp and distant. Her silk blouse, pristine and cream-colored, matched the cold tone in her voice as she turned to face Sarah. "You said you needed to talk. So talk." Sarah stepped in slowly, closing the door behind her. She took a breath. The air was thick with tension, and the sound of the rain tapping on the windows was the only thing keeping it from bursting like a balloon. "There's something about Dad's will you don't know," Sarah began, her voice cautious but firm. Daniel found another document. A letter. "It changes everything." Emily arched an eyebrow. "A letter? What kind of letter?" Sarah opened the folder and pulled out a photocopy of the handwritten note. "It's from Dad, dated just 2 weeks before he died. He left everything to me, Emily." The room fell silent. Emily laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was disbelief. "You're kidding." "I'm not," Sarah said. "I saw it myself. Daniel's verifying the authenticity, but it's real. His handwriting. His signature." Emily took a long sip of wine, then stared at Sarah as if sizing her up for the first time in years. "And what, now you think you're entitled to it all? After everything I've done for this family? After all the years I spent managing Dad's affairs, making the hard choices while you were off trying to find yourself?" Sarah's heart pounded. "I didn't ask for this, Emily. But it's the truth. He changed his mind. Maybe he saw something in me, something he didn't see before." Emily's face hardened. Or maybe he was confused. Sick. People get irrational when they're close to death. "You really think he meant it?" "I don't know what he meant. But it's in writing. And legally, it matters." Emily turned away, her reflection staring back at her from the rain-dappled window. "You don't deserve it," she said quietly. "You don't know what it's like to carry this family's legacy. The pressure. The sacrifices. You weren't there when it mattered." Sarah flinched. "You think I didn't feel left out? Invisible? I've lived my whole life in your shadow. I never asked to compete with you, but I had to. I had to just to survive in this family." Emily spun around. "So this is payback, huh? This is how you get even?" "No," Sarah said, her voice soft but clear. "This is about truth. About finally understanding why I always felt like a stranger in my own home. Maybe Dad knew he'd never made space for me, and this was his way of making it right." Emily didn't reply. Her silence felt louder than any scream. Later that night, Sarah sat in her car parked outside the house, headlights dimmed, engine off. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was Daniel. "Daniel, we need to meet. There's more. About your mother." Her blood ran cold. She hadn't even thought about her mother. She'd passed away years before, long before the inheritance drama. Her death was ruled a stroke, sudden and unexpected. But her name hadn't come up in the will at all, at least, not in the version Sarah originally heard. She dialed Daniel's number. "Hey," he answered quickly. "Are you alone?" Sarah looked around her dark car. "Yeah. What's going on?" "I kept digging," Daniel said. "Your father didn't just change his will. He made specific arrangements, things he didn't trust to leave to just anyone. There are references in his journals, mentions of a separate account. He called it the true inheritance." Sarah's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "He left more than what's in the will. There's a trust. And it's not just about money." Daniel's voice dropped a note lower. "Your mother's name is on it too. And the only person authorized to access it is the true heir. Which, according to the second letter, is you." Sarah closed her eyes, head resting back against the seat. "Does Emily know?" "No. And for now, she can't. Not until we understand what's really in that trust." There was a long pause. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, faster now. "Do you think Dad did all of this because he knew something was going to happen?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "I think your father was protecting something. Or someone. And I think whatever it was, it scared him." Sarah opened her eyes slowly, staring up at the ceiling of the car. What had her father been trying to hide? The next morning, Sarah returned to the city. She stood outside the law firm, folder in hand, hair tied back, heart pounding. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. This was about rewriting the story she thought she knew about her family, her father, her past. She passed by a group of people on the sidewalk and overheard a conversation that stopped her cold. "Did you hear about the estate case? The Preston family? Looks like someone's contesting the will." Her last name, Preston. She turned to look, but the group had already disappeared into the building next door. The word was out. People were talking. And this fight, this war for truth, for the legacy, was no longer private. She wasn't just the invisible daughter anymore. She was a threat. The city looked different to Sarah now, sharper, colder. She walked with purpose, weaving through the throng of busy strangers, the manila folder tight against her side. The information inside felt radioactive. It didn't just shift her place in the family, it shifted the foundation of everything she thought she knew. She had grown up in the Preston legacy. The name carried weight: Preston Real Estate, Preston Holdings, the Preston Foundation. But now she was beginning to see that legacy not as a tower built on success, but a fortress hiding something darker. And she was the one meant to uncover it. Inside Daniel's office, the lights were dimmer than usual. Rain streaked the window. He was already standing when she arrived, pacing like a man trying to walk off bad news. "I pulled the file," he said without greeting. "The trust account. It's not part of the public estate. It was registered under a holding company, Cypress 71, your father's private entity." Cypress 71, Sarah repeated, unfamiliar with the name. "Most of his money never passed through traditional accounts," Daniel continued. "But here's the weird part. Your mother was co-signatory. After she died, your father didn't replace her with Emily, or you. He left it empty." Sarah sat slowly, the weight of that detail settling in. "He didn't trust Emily," she said aloud, more to herself than to Daniel. "He didn't want her to touch it, even though she was the golden child." Daniel nodded. "This trust was meant for you all along, but it was locked until you reached out to me." He slid a document across the desk. Sarah looked down at it. A key code. An address. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a safety deposit box. 5th and Main. We found the access record tied to the trust. Your father visited it once. 2 weeks before he died." Sarah's stomach dropped. 2 weeks. That was when he wrote the secret letter. She looked up at Daniel. "He left something there." "I think so," Daniel said. "And it might explain everything." The vault room at the 5th and Main Bank was silent, save for the distant hum of security lights and the echo of Sarah's footsteps. A bank officer led her through a narrow corridor lined with brushed steel boxes, then stopped at number 418B. Sarah handed over the access form with trembling hands. The officer unlocked the box, then stepped back. "You can view it in the private room," he said politely. Sarah lifted the small drawer-like box and carried it into a room with a single table, a chair, and silence that seemed to press against her lungs. She sat down and opened it. Inside were 2 envelopes, yellowed slightly from time and thick with contents. One was labeled, "For Sarah, open alone," in her father's unmistakable handwriting. The other was blank. Tucked underneath them was a flash drive and a faded photo, her father and her mother standing in front of a cabin in the woods. She froze. She had never seen this picture before. She opened the first envelope. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means the truth has started to come out. I'm sorry it had to be like this. I spent too many years letting fear guide my decisions and not enough trusting my own daughter to understand what I had to do. Your mother and I made choices, difficult ones. And the consequences of those choices weren't just financial. They were personal. Emily doesn't know the truth. She never could. Not without risking everything. The flash drive contains a video. It will explain what happened. Please don't show it to anyone. Not yet. Not until you understand what you've inherited. You are the only one I trust now. Love. Dad." Sarah felt like the air had been punched out of her. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "You are the only one I trust now." She pulled out her laptop, inserted the flash drive, and opened the single file. The screen flickered, then a video loaded. Her father appeared, sitting in his study, visibly older, eyes weary, voice low. "If this is playing, then I'm gone. And you're not supposed to be here yet, Sarah. But maybe you needed to know. I never told you the whole truth about your mother." He paused, visibly struggling. "She didn't just die from a stroke. That's what we told everyone. But what really happened? It's tied to the trust. The land. The deals I made. There was a property up north, our summer cabin. Your mother found something there. Something tied to my investors. She wanted to go to the police. I tried to stop her from pushing too hard. I thought I could manage it, protect her. But she disappeared one night. And 2 days later, they found her car at the bottom of a ravine. I never believed it was an accident. I had to make it look natural. That was the only way I could protect you girls. But I never forgave myself." Sarah's mouth went dry. Her ears rang. "The trust exists because I couldn't let her die for nothing. The truth is buried in that land. At the cabin. That's where it all began, and that's where you'll find the rest of the story." When the video ended, Sarah sat frozen. Her mother had been silenced, and her father had covered it up. The weight of it all sank into her bones. She wasn't just the heir to an estate or a company. She was the heir to a secret, a cover-up, a lie, and maybe even something darker. And now she understood why Emily had been left out. She didn't just lack the strength to carry the legacy. She wasn't meant to know the legacy's true cost. Back at her apartment that night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The city moved outside her window, uncaring and constant. But her world was tilting on its axis. She opened her phone, pulled up the number she had avoided calling. Emily. She hovered over the call button, then stopped. Not yet. Not until she knew the full truth. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The summer cabin was a relic of a time long gone. The kind of place that should have been full of laughter and warmth, where memories were meant to be made, not buried. But for Sarah, it was a haunting place, a memory of something she hadn't quite understood. The kind of place her father had often mentioned with a hint of nostalgia, but never too much. It wasn't until now that she understood why. The drive was long, the kind of lonely stretch of road that went on forever, winding through dense forest and over rolling hills. Sarah didn't mind the solitude. It gave her space to think, or perhaps to escape her thoughts. The cabin was at the edge of a forgotten town, a place even the locals had stopped visiting. She pulled up the gravel drive, the tires crunching beneath her. The house stood before her, quiet, unassuming, just as it had been in the photograph. But this time, it felt different. This time, it was no longer a place of family memories. It was a place of untold secrets. The door creaked open as Sarah stepped out of her car, the smell of pine trees and earth filling the air. She walked slowly toward the house, feeling a weight in her chest, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She hadn't told anyone she was coming here. Not Daniel, not Emily. No one knew except for her. She reached for the key hidden under the porch, just as her father had taught her. It took a moment to get the door open, the lock resisting at first before finally giving way. The door opened with a groan, revealing a dusty, dimly lit interior. The furniture was worn but still standing. The old wooden floors creaked as she stepped inside. She had been here once, years ago, on a trip with her father. But the memory felt distant now, as if it belonged to someone else. She moved through the rooms, her eyes scanning the space, as if it might reveal something, anything, that would make sense of the chaos swirling in her head. The living room looked the same, heavy curtains blocking out the sun, the fireplace still cold and used for years. It was the kitchen that drew her attention next. The place where her mother had spent hours cooking meals that she would never remember. Her gaze fell on the small table by the window, and there it was, a folder. Thick and sealed, just as her father had said in the video. She opened it carefully, her hands shaking slightly, as though the contents might bite her. Inside was a collection of documents, old contracts, handwritten notes, and photographs that looked like they were taken in the early days of her parents' marriage. But there was one document that stood out among the rest, its words bold and underlined. It was a land deed. She read it twice before the words settled in her mind. This land, and all that comes with it, is hereby transferred to the Preston family trust upon my passing, to be kept secret from all but the rightful heir. The inheritance herein is not just of property, but of knowledge and power. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Her father had transferred something far more valuable than land, something powerful. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind her. She spun around, heart racing. Standing in the doorway was Emily. Emily's face was a mix of anger, hurt, and something Sarah couldn't quite place. Her sister stepped into the room, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "I knew you'd come here," Emily said, her voice tight. "You always had to find your way into everything, even when you weren't invited." Sarah felt the sting of her words, but stood her ground. "I wasn't sure if I should, but I had to know what was hidden here. The trust, the land, the truth." Emily's eyes narrowed. "So, you figured it out. You think you're entitled to all of this because you got that damn letter. But let me make something clear, Sarah, this wasn't meant for you." "I am the heir," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "At least, that's what I thought. But this land, this deed, it's not just about property, is it? It's something else. Something your name isn't on. It never was." Emily's lips trembled slightly. Then she took a deep breath, the tension in her posture shifting. "You don't understand. Dad kept this from us for a reason. He was trying to protect you. From the truth." "The truth," Sarah repeated, her voice rising in disbelief. "You think this is about protecting me?" "He was protecting himself. And you." "Stop." Emily's voice was sharp now. "You don't get it. If you go too deep, if you uncover what's really here, you'll ruin everything. Not just for you, but for all of us." Sarah's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" Emily took a step forward, her eyes softening for the first time since Sarah had arrived. "I found out too. Before you did. After Mom died, I started looking into Dad's finances. There were things I never told you. Things I never could." She paused, staring at the folder Sarah was holding. "When Mom died, I thought it was just a random tragedy. But it wasn't. It was all connected." Sarah felt a pit form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "The land, this land. Your father and his investors were involved in something far darker than you can imagine. It wasn't just about business. It was about power. And Mom, she started to figure it out. She was going to expose them. And that's why she died." Sarah took a step back, the air suddenly heavy. "No, that's impossible. You're saying you think they killed her?" Emily's eyes were filled with a fear that Sarah hadn't seen before. "I didn't know how to stop it. But I knew. And I tried to warn Dad, tried to keep him from doing something he couldn't take back. But when he realized what your mother had found out, he started covering his tracks. He made sure you wouldn't ever see this. And now that you're here," she trailed off, her voice faltering. "It's not safe, Sarah. For any of us." Sarah stood frozen, staring at her sister. The weight of her words crushed against her chest. If what Emily was saying was true, if their mother had died because of something hidden in these woods, something buried under decades of lies, then everything they thought they knew about their family, about their past, was a lie. And it was a lie that Sarah was now tangled in. "Emily," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "What are we supposed to do now?" Emily's face twisted with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "We finish what Mom started. We take them down." Sarah swallowed hard. Are you sure we're ready for this? Emily hesitated, but only for a moment. We don't have a choice. The storm outside was getting worse as they walked out of the cabin together, a new kind of silence between them. The truth had already begun to change everything. And there was no turning back. The drive back from the cabin was wordless. Rain pounded the windshield like a warning, and Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. Beside her, Emily sat with arms crossed, face turned toward the window, jaw clenched. The storm wasn't just outside the car, it was between them. Every few minutes, Sarah glanced sideways, wondering if Emily would say something. Anything, but she didn't. And Sarah didn't know how to break the silence. Not after what they had just unearthed. A secret trust. A dead mother. A father with blood on his conscience. They were no longer just sisters. They were co-conspirators in a story neither of them wanted to tell. Back in the city, the atmosphere in Sarah's apartment was tense. She tossed her keys on the table, the sound unnaturally loud. Emily stood just inside the door, soaked from the rain, watching her. So, Emily said finally, "What now?" Sarah took a breath. "We need to go through everything in that folder. If Mom knew something, really knew, we have to figure out what it was. There might be more. Records. Journals. Something she left behind." Emily shook her head. "I've already gone through the house. After she died, I turned that place inside out. If there was something more, I would have found it." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Unless she hid it somewhere you wouldn't look." "Like where?" Sarah opened the manila folder again and pulled out the faded photo, the one from the cabin. Her mother stood in the background, near a tree, almost out of frame. She looked closely again. There was something odd about the tree. A notch or maybe a carving. It wasn't obvious unless you were looking. "Here," Sarah said, tapping the photo. "This tree." She's pointing at it. Emily squinted, stepping closer. "You think there's something out there? Buried?" "I don't think she posed for this photo by accident," Sarah said. "If we go back, we check the spot. Carefully this time." Emily nodded slowly, but her voice was low. "If we do this, we don't go to Daniel." "Not yet." Sarah blinked. "Why not?" "Because I don't know who's clean anymore," Emily said. "If Dad kept this from him, maybe there's a reason. Maybe Daniel's not who you think he is." Sarah opened her mouth to argue. Daniel had been loyal to the family for years, but she hesitated. After everything they'd learned, she could no longer afford to believe in anyone blindly. "Okay," she said. "We do this ourselves." That night, sleep didn't come easy. Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together everything. The will, the letter, the trust, the video, the drive, the photo. But it was the sound of her mother's voice that haunted her. Not in a literal sense, but in the quiet echoes of memory, soft laughter, lullabies, whispered warnings. She had been the quiet center of their world, and she had died holding the truth. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Emily. "Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Before anyone can follow." Sarah stared at it, then typed back, "I'll be ready." They arrived at the cabin just after sunrise. Mist hung low over the trees, the light muted and soft. The woods felt still, too still. Sarah led the way, photo in hand, scanning the landscape for the tree in the background. After nearly half an hour of circling the clearing, she found it. "Here," she said. The tree was older now, but the mark was still there, just as it was in the photo. A small carving near the base, S+M, inside a crude heart. "S and M," Emily whispered. "Sarah and Mom." Sarah reached for the shovel they'd brought, heart pounding. "If there's something here, it's been waiting a long time." They dug in silence. 6 inches down, the shovel hit something solid. Sarah dropped to her knees and brushed away the dirt. A rusted tin box emerged, sealed tight with old tape and a padlock. Emily pulled bolt cutters from the bag. "You came prepared," Sarah said. I'm tired of being unprepared, Emily replied flatly. The lock snapped. Sarah opened the box slowly. Inside was a journal, her mother's. The pages were worn, the ink faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable. They sat down on the forest floor and began to read. April 5th. He doesn't know I found the documents. I saw the land deal, the one with the offshore account. They're hiding money. But it's not just money. I think they're laundering something else. Something dangerous. May 2nd. I told him I'd go to the police if he didn't walk away. He begged me to stay quiet. Said they'd come after us both. That it was bigger than we could imagine. I'm scared. But I won't let them do this. Not to the girls. Not to Sarah. June 1st. I think someone's watching me. If anything happens, the truth is in the cabin. In the tree. She'll know where to look. By the time they finished, Sarah's hands were shaking. Emily looked stunned. She tried to warn us. She did leave a trail. Sarah nodded, swallowing back the lump in her throat. She trusted me to find it. They sat in silence for a long while, the journal resting between them. Later that afternoon, back in the cabin, Emily broke the silence. You know this changes everything. Sarah looked up. I know. We can't pretend this is just about a will anymore, Emily said. It's about a conspiracy, a cover-up, and people who will do anything to keep it buried. Sarah nodded. We go to the press. Emily hesitated. That makes us targets. Maybe, Sarah said. But it makes us free too. Emily gave her a long look. We're not kids anymore. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Sarah met her gaze. I'm ready. And for the first time in years, they weren't sisters at odds. They were allies. The morning after Sarah and Emily uncovered their mother's journal, everything changed. The calm they had been holding on to shattered, like glass falling into a million pieces. The decision to go public had been made, but it was never going to be as simple as sharing the truth. The consequences were already knocking at their door. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the journal and a series of carefully prepared documents spread out in front of her. She had a plan. At least, she thought she did. But the knot in her stomach was growing tighter with every passing minute. Emily paced in front of the window, eyes scanning the street below, but Sarah knew she wasn't just watching for intruders. She was watching for the weight of their decision to catch up to them. You're sure we're doing the right thing? Emily asked, voice strained. Sarah didn't look up immediately, still lost in the sea of papers. I don't know. But we can't live with this. We can't let them keep getting away with it. Emily stopped pacing and turned toward her. What if they come after us? What if someone tries to stop us before we can tell the whole world? We'll be ready. Sarah's voice was steady, but inside, she felt anything but certain. The storm was coming, of that, she was sure. But the question was, who would survive it? The moment Sarah hit send on the email to the investigative reporter, she felt like the world shifted beneath her feet. The journalist, Jake Wilson, was known for breaking stories no one else dared to touch. He had a reputation for getting results, even if those results were explosive and dangerous. This was it. There was no going back now. The inbox pinged with an automatic response seconds later. Thank you for contacting us. Your submission has been received and will be reviewed shortly. Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders, only to replace it with a different kind of weight, the kind that made the air feel thick, heavy. Do you think he'll actually help? Emily asked, glancing over at Sarah. I don't know, Sarah replied, her mind racing through every possible outcome. But I've seen what he can do. If he's willing to look into it, then it's out of our hands. Emily stood up and paced again. We've put ourselves out there. If this gets out, it could ruin us. Not just the Preston name, the family. I know, Sarah said quietly. But we've already lost the family we thought we knew. Hours passed in a tense silence. They ate dinner together in near-complete quiet. The room felt suffocating, the weight of what they had unleashed pressing down on them. Just as they were finishing, Sarah's phone buzzed again. It was Jake Wilson. She felt a chill crawl up her spine as she unlocked the screen and read the message. "We're meeting tomorrow morning. Be ready." The next day dawned gray and stormy, as though the skies were mirroring Sarah's mood. Emily insisted on driving them to the meeting at a nondescript coffee shop in the middle of the city. When they arrived, Sarah felt her heart pounding in her chest. The place was quiet, almost too quiet, and the heavy feeling of being watched wasn't lost on either of them. They sat at a table in the corner, and not 5 minutes later, a man in a long coat approached them. He was older, late 40s perhaps, his face weathered but sharp, and his eyes were constantly moving. "Jake Wilson." "Sarah Preston, Emily Preston," he said, his voice low and measured. "I've been following your family's history for a while now. What you're about to share isn't just a scandal. It's a bombshell. Isn't that what we're hoping for?" Emily asked, her tone laced with tension. Jake smiled faintly, leaning in. "I don't hope for anything in this job. I just report what I find. But if you're going to go public with this, you need to understand what's at stake. These people don't play by the rules. They're dangerous. And once I dig into this, they'll come after you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had expected resistance, but she hadn't expected the weight of those words. "You're sure you want to do this?" Jake pressed. Sarah looked at Emily, whose eyes were fixed on the table, deep in thought. Then she turned back to Jake. "We have no choice. We're in this now, whether we like it or not. We want to know everything." Jake took a deep breath. "Fine. But understand this. Once I publish, there's no going back. Your lives, everything, will be changed forever." "Then let's do it," Sarah said. The next few days passed in a blur. Jake worked quickly, combing through the evidence Sarah and Emily had gathered. Every phone call felt like a trap. Every knock on the door felt like someone was about to drag them into a world they didn't understand fully. By the end of the week, Sarah had stopped sleeping altogether. The weight of what they had done hung over her like a storm cloud. She didn't know how long they could keep this up, how much longer they could hold the pieces together before it all fell apart. Then, late one evening, it happened. A knock at the door. Sarah's heart stopped. She froze in place, unable to move. Emily glanced at her with wide eyes. "Who's that?" "I don't know," Sarah said. "I wasn't expecting anyone." They stood in the hallway, staring at the door. The knock came again. Louder, more insistent. "Should we open it?" Emily asked, her voice tight. Sarah nodded, but her heart raced with fear. Something was wrong. She could feel it. She opened the door. And there, standing in the doorway, was Daniel. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Daniel had been the one person she thought she could trust, the one person who had been a constant in her life. But now, as he stood there, his expression unreadable, all she felt was uncertainty. "Sarah," Daniel said quietly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You've done something reckless." Daniel's presence in the doorway felt like a jolt of electricity, sending a shockwave through Sarah's chest. He hadn't been part of the plan. He couldn't have been, at least, not in the way he was now. "Daniel?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper as she stepped back to let him in. Her heart was pounding in her chest, each beat echoing louder than the last. The man she had once trusted more than anyone else in her life was standing in front of her, and something in his eyes told her this wasn't a social visit. Emily stood behind Sarah, her posture tense, every muscle ready to spring. She didn't speak, but the look she gave Sarah was clear. "Do you trust him?" Sarah didn't know anymore. "Can we talk?" Daniel asked, his voice strained, a hint of urgency flickering behind his normally calm demeanor. His eyes scanned the room quickly, as if checking for escape routes. Sarah nodded stiffly, motioning for him to sit at the table. But neither of them made a move to sit. There was an awkward silence, thick with unspoken questions. "Is this about the story?" Sarah finally asked, her voice barely audible. She was trying to keep it together, but the pressure was suffocating. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. It's about everything. About your mother. About the land. About what you're getting yourselves into. Emily crossed her arms, her gaze unflinching. What are you talking about, Daniel? They know, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. They know you've been digging. You've already crossed a line you don't even understand yet. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She didn't want to believe him, but the way his words hung in the air made her pulse quicken. Who knows? What do you mean they? The people your father was involved with, Daniel replied, looking directly at Sarah. They're dangerous. And now that you've started this, you're a threat. All of you. The words hit Sarah like a slap in the face. You're not making sense. My father. Your father, Daniel interrupted, wasn't just keeping secrets from you. He was protecting you. From a network that's much bigger and more dangerous than you can even imagine. If they get wind of what you're doing, you won't just lose the family business. You'll lose everything. Everyone. There was a weight in his words that made Sarah's chest tighten. She didn't want to hear it, didn't want to believe it. But she could see the fear in Daniel's eyes, real, palpable fear. It wasn't the kind of fear someone showed when they were trying to protect their own skin. It was the kind of fear someone had when they knew they had already stepped too far into something dark and dangerous. And you, Emily said, her voice cutting through the tension, you've been hiding this from us? Daniel hesitated, his gaze flickering to the floor. It wasn't my place to tell you. But I've known about the people your father was involved with. I was trying to protect you, too. Protect us. Emily scoffed. By lying to us? By keeping us in the dark? How is that protection? Daniel's jaw clenched. You don't understand what you're up against. Your mother was right to try and stop this. But she didn't know the full extent either. The Preston family is entangled in something that's beyond us. Your father, he was the one they kept in the dark. Sarah blinked, her mind trying to piece together what Daniel was saying. You're telling me my father didn't know? After everything? How could he not know? Daniel's eyes darkened. Your father didn't know the whole truth. He only found out when your mother started asking too many questions. But by then, it was already too late. The floor beneath Sarah's feet felt unsteady. The man she had trusted with every part of her life, Daniel, was telling her that her father had been kept in the dark. He was being used, just like them. So you did know, Emily said bitterly. All this time, you knew and said nothing. Why? Why didn't you warn us sooner? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked over at Sarah, his eyes pleading. I was trying to protect you. And I thought I could control the situation. But now I see that I was wrong. You've already gone too far. Sarah was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. What exactly is it that you think we've done? You've put a target on your backs, Daniel said grimly. You're digging into something that could bring down people who are far more powerful than your father ever was. And if you don't stop, you're going to find yourselves in a situation that you can't get out of. I'm not just talking about losing the family name. I'm talking about losing your lives. The room felt colder, the air thick with a sudden, overwhelming sense of danger. Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped them on her jeans, trying to steady herself. You're saying we should stop? After everything we've uncovered? I'm saying you should walk away, Daniel said, his voice low but urgent. I'm saying that your lives are worth more than the truth. If you go any deeper, you'll regret it. You can't fight them. Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of Daniel's words pressing against her chest like a heavy stone. She looked over at Emily, who was staring at the ground, her face unreadable. Then Sarah looked back at Daniel. And you? Are you going to walk away? Daniel flinched, his expression tightening. I don't have a choice. You've always had a choice, Daniel, Sarah said, her voice hard. You always had the option to be honest with us. You chose not to be. And now you're telling us to back off. You're just as guilty as the rest of them. The silence that followed was thick with accusation. Daniel's face hardened, and for a moment, Sarah saw the cracks in his facade, the mask of loyalty and control he had worn so carefully for years. But beneath it, there was something darker, something that hadn't been visible before. "We're not backing off," Emily said flatly. "Not now. You've lost the right to protect us." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "We're going through with this, Daniel. No matter what." Daniel's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Sarah saw something like fear flash across his face. But it wasn't fear of what they would do, it was fear of what he had already done. "I told you," he said quietly. "You're making a mistake." With that, he turned on his heel and walked out the door, leaving the sisters standing in the silence that followed. The storm was here, and there was no going back. The next few days blurred together like a waking nightmare, one that Sarah and Emily couldn't wake from. Every phone call felt like a trap. Every knock at the door made their hearts race. They had crossed a line, and now the repercussions were starting to close in. Jake Wilson had been working overtime. He dug deeper, contacted former associates of their fathers, and even managed to get his hands on some sealed documents from an underground source who wanted to remain anonymous. Sarah was waiting on the next step. Waiting for Jake's final confirmation before they took the plunge and went public. But that didn't make her feel safe. In fact, it was only getting worse. It started with an email. Sarah was sitting at her desk, scrolling through the latest updates from Jake. Her inbox pinged. The subject line was simple, yet the hair on her arms stood up the second she saw it. From unknown sender. Subject: "You're being watched." The email had no other content. Just a photo attached. A picture of Sarah, taken through a window, standing in her kitchen. The same kitchen where she had been just moments ago, reading Jake's emails. The picture was taken from across the street, blurry but unmistakable. A chill ran down her spine. She didn't need to look at Emily to know she'd seen it too. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, not sure if she should respond or simply delete it. But her gut told her this wasn't just some random threat. Someone was watching them. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She hit reply anyway. To unknown sender. Subject: "What do you want?" She waited, but no response came. It wasn't until later that night that the phone rang. The voice on the other end was distorted, deep and menacing. "We see you." The words chilled Sarah to the bone. They weren't asking her to stop. They weren't trying to make a deal. They were warning her. The voice continued, low and calculated. "You're digging too deep. Stop now or the consequences will be worse than you can imagine." Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. She slammed the phone down, her breath short and shallow. Emily was already in the room, eyes wide. "They know," Sarah whispered. "They know we've been digging." Emily stepped forward, her jaw tight. "What now?" Sarah swallowed hard. The email, the phone call. She felt the walls closing in. "We go to Jake. We get this out in the open. The whole world needs to know. This has gone too far." The next morning, they met with Jake again. This time, he looked more like a man on edge than the cool, collected reporter Sarah had seen before. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were shaking slightly as he slid a thick folder across the table to them. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "The documents. The full story. The dark web of connections your father was a part of." Sarah opened the folder, her eyes scanning the first few pages. There were financial transactions, names she didn't recognize, and addresses that didn't mean anything to her. But it was the last page that made her stomach twist. It was a list. A list of people with high-powered connections, politicians, businessmen, and even law enforcement officials who had been involved in illegal activity. And there, at the very bottom of the list, was one name she recognized. Her father's. Her fingers trembled as she read it. He had been connected to something far darker than she had ever imagined. "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. This goes all the way to the top." Jake nodded gravely. "It's deeper than you realize. Your father was not just laundering money. He was involved in something much bigger. Something that goes all the way to the highest levels of power. And now, because you've uncovered this, you've made yourself a target. Emily looked at Jake. What do you want us to do now? Jake hesitated. The information needs to be out there. It's not just about exposing the Preston family anymore. It's about exposing a network. A conspiracy. If we don't act now, it'll be buried forever. Sarah felt a pit grow in her stomach. How do we know we can trust you? How do we know you're not part of this? Jake's eyes darkened. I've been investigating this network for years. I lost my credibility over it, and I've made enemies who would love nothing more than to see me ruined. Trust me. You want to expose this? You can't stop now. For the first time, Sarah saw the weight of the situation in Jake's eyes. This wasn't just about a story. This was about survival. Later that evening, Sarah and Emily sat in their apartment, going over everything once more. The storm outside was relentless, pounding the windows with furious rain and howling winds. Do we go through with this? Emily asked, her voice quiet but tinged with fear. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, her mind racing. We don't have a choice. We've already crossed the line. If we back off now, all of this, the truth, it dies with us. Emily sighed and leaned back in her chair. But we're risking everything. Our lives. Our future. What if we're wrong? I don't think we are, Sarah said, her voice low but firm. The pieces are falling into place. We're getting too close. And I don't think they'll stop until they've silenced us. The weight of those words hit Sarah hard. There were forces at play here that they couldn't even begin to understand. Powerful forces that would go to any lengths to bury the truth. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah sat by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. She kept replaying the conversation with Jake in her head. The things they had uncovered about their father's involvement, the dark, dangerous world they were now part of. But the thought that lingered, the one that gnawed at her mind, was what Daniel had said. You're making a mistake. The words haunted her. Had they really crossed a line they couldn't come back from? Or was this exactly what their mother had tried to protect them from all along? Was the truth worth the cost? The answer, she realized, was inevitable. They had already started. They couldn't stop. But neither could they predict what would happen next. The press conference was set for 10 a.m. sharp at an undisclosed location in downtown Chicago. Jake had arranged it with the kind of precision that suggested he'd done this dance before, walked people right up to the edge of danger and dared them to leap. Sarah stood backstage, her hands trembling, staring at the thick folder clutched in her arms. Financial records, journal entries, offshore account transfers, sealed court documents, and her mother's letter. It was all there. The whole tangled truth. A bomb primed to explode the moment she stepped into the spotlight. Beside her, Emily looked pale but determined. No makeup. No jewelry. Just grit. You ready for this? She asked. Sarah didn't answer right away. She glanced at the stage beyond the curtain, where rows of seats were filling with journalists. Somewhere out there were allies. Somewhere else enemies. I don't know if anyone's ever ready for this, Sarah whispered. But I am done being afraid. Jake approached. A small earpiece looped over one ear. You've got about 8 minutes before we go live. Once you step out there, there's no going back. Was there ever? Emily asked, almost smirking. Jake didn't smile. I'm serious. You've already poked the beast. Once this story breaks, people will lose jobs, money, maybe even their freedom. They will come for you. Sarah nodded. Let them. We're not hiding anymore. When the lights hit her, Sarah blinked against the intensity. Cameras clicked like gunfire. She stepped up to the podium and took a breath that filled her lungs and steadied her soul. Good morning, she said. Her voice was clear, firm. My name is Sarah Preston. I'm the daughter of Charles Preston. You may know him as a businessman, philanthropist, and founder of Preston Holdings. A murmur swept through the crowd. But today, I'm not here to talk about the man the world knew. I'm here to talk about the truth. She unfolded the letter her mother had written, the one that started it all. Her hands shook as she read it, but her voice did not falter. As the words echoed across the room, she watched faces in the audience shift. Some showed shock. Others scribbled furiously into notebooks. But a few, just a few, looked panicked. She read through the documents exposing the secret trust, the offshore money laundering, the hush payments. She showed the map that led them to the cabin, the photos, the journals, and finally, the will. The real will. Because as it turned out, Sarah wasn't just telling a story of corruption and lies. She was claiming her birthright. A gasp swept the room as Sarah held up the amended will. Dated 3 months before their mother's death, notarized and sealed. It had never been filed. Never been seen. Until now. The updated version left everything to Sarah. Not Emily. Not their father. Just her. And beside it was a DNA test, matching Sarah's DNA not only to her mother, but to another man entirely. A quiet descended over the room. "My name is Sarah Preston," she said again, slower this time. "But legally, I am Sarah Whitaker. My biological father was not Charles Preston. My mother left me everything because she knew the truth. And she died protecting it." A thunderous wave of questions erupted. Reporters shouted her name. Emily stood silently beside her, no longer the enemy, no longer the spoiled heir. Just her sister, her partner, her only constant in a world that had twisted beyond recognition. Backstage, after the chaos, Jake handed her a burner phone. "You'll need to disappear for a while," he said. "They're not going to take this lying down." Sarah took the phone without question. Emily was quiet, her brow furrowed. "You really want to do this?" Sarah turned to her. "Do we have a choice?" Emily laughed bitterly. "Guess not." By nightfall, the story had gone viral. Heiress reveals shocking truth behind billionaire's empire. DNA bombshell at center of family feud. Exposé ties Preston Holdings to offshore crimes. The headlines screamed across every major outlet. Twitter exploded. News vans camped outside their apartment. And then, in the darkest hour of night, came the break-in. Sarah woke to a sound. Glass. Shattered. She rolled out of bed, heart pounding, and found Emily already awake, holding a baseball bat. They moved like they had rehearsed it. Quiet. Quick. Careful. There were 2 men. Unmarked black clothing. Gloves. One had a crowbar. The other, a tablet device. They weren't here to steal. They were here to destroy evidence. Or them. But Jake had warned them. They had backups. Flash drives stored in multiple safe locations. The journal uploaded to the cloud. And the burner phone already activated. They got out. Barely. Through the back stairwell, down the fire escape, and into the car waiting 3 blocks over. Jake was driving. "You weren't kidding," Emily said breathlessly, glancing back at the burning light of their apartment. "Nope," Jake said grimly. "This is what it looks like when you tell the truth." Weeks passed. They moved from city to city. Sarah gave interviews through encrypted calls. Jake published more damning documents. Arrests began. Charles Preston was subpoenaed. His lawyer, Daniel, resigned suddenly, his bank accounts frozen, his name splashed across headlines with phrases like conspiracy to defraud and obstruction of justice. And Sarah? She kept going. 6 months later. The courtroom was full. Cameras lined the back. Sarah sat at the witness stand, wearing a dark navy suit and an expression carved from stone. She gave her testimony. When she stepped down, the judge nodded. And later that day, it became official. Sarah Whitaker was named the rightful heir to the Preston estate, not because of blood, but because of truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. She stood beside Emily, both of them changed by fire. "Any regrets?" a voice called out. Sarah paused, looked out at the flashing lights. and smiled. Only that I didn't find the truth sooner. She turned, whispered to Emily, "Ready to go home?" Emily smiled. "Depends. Which one?" Sarah laughed. "The one we're about to build." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?